Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to announce our show today. It's the Grief Unchained live show, and we're doing this series of shows on overcoming. There's so much out in the media right now about abuse and the impact of abuse. And this show is really about not only the abuse itself, but how do we live and thrive after experiencing things that are really, really challenging. My name is Sandy Atmore. I'm a life coach and I'm also a certified grief recovery specialist. And I have a very special guest here with me today. She's my sister. Actually, she's my sister in law, but she's my sister. This is my sister. So, welcome, Chris. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Well, Chris, why don't you tell us just a little bit about you? What do you do now? Where are you today?
Well, right now I'm currently getting ready to enroll back in school. However, I'm a recovering addict as well as a victim of incest, molestation, and rape.
Wow, wow.
hmm
Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris is amazing. We're going to spend some time today. Chris is going to share some of her story and share how she's overcome a lot of the things that happened to her. And I want to just take a minute. The reason that I wanted Chris to be on the show is because Chris is an amazing person. I was just with her recently celebrating her birthday and just watching her. She's so full of joy. She doesn't care if people bring her gifts. She's bringing the gift. I mean, she has such a big personality. She loves people in amazing ways. Her heart is, if I can just impact one person, I'm going to do it. And I looked at her that day and I thought, oh my gosh, she has to be on this show. I have to have her here. So please bear with us. We're going to go deep for a few minutes. I don't want our time together to just be on the surface. We're going to go deep and then we're going to talk about what is the other side of that depth. So I want to start just by, asking Chris some questions. And as many people know, I too have been through very extensive abuse, physical, verbal, sexual abuse for the majority of my childhood. And I'm a really big proponent that not only do we need to talk about this, but we also need to be inspired that there's another life. I think out there I see so many times where people feel like once I've experienced something horrific, my life is over. And I want to be here to make a statement that says that's not true. That's absolutely not true. So, Chris, why don't we start? We'll jump right in. Why don't we start by having you talk for just a little bit about what it was like growing up in your home? Where did you grow up, and what was that experience like for you?
I actually grew up in a household where it was full of chaos and drama, drugs and alcohol. Um, yes, and we had family members who would come in and live with us. It was never just our parents and my siblings, myself and my siblings. There was always an uncle, a aunt, a friend, a stranger. My mother had this very soft heart, so she would just invite and then let anyone in, and it actually began to affect us because things started taking place. I was molested by an uncle who lived in the household. And at a very early age, I can remember all the way back to 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Which started the fear, which brought the fear. I began to shut down at a very early age. I became aggressive towards my friends, family members. Yes, I began to kind of shut down at a very, very early age. Yes.
Wow, wow. And I know from talking with you, I feel like one of the things that is really amazing is you do remember so many things that
Absolutely.
happened. So you were in your home. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of drama. Was there a lot of drugs? Was there drinking?
Yes, well, the drugs at the age of 4 or 5, it was more so with the uncles and the aunts. However, my mom was a drinker, and my father drank from time to time, but most of the chaos came from outside of the household. It was kind of like a take care of business thing, and you drink when you sit down and you're done with everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know we were talking a little bit earlier, and you were sharing about what happened when you were 11 years old. Do you want to
Yes.
share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. By the time I was 11, I became suicidal. Um, by that time, I had been taken out of my mother's home, placed in a foster home for a month, and then moved to my aunt, one of my great aunts. And in that household, there were like 6 adults who used and abused drugs and alcohol. And mind you, my aunt was a church-going woman. And all the responsibility kind of fell on me, as far as washing adult clothes, catering to their kids. Plus, my aunt had foster kids and other family member kids. So that was kind of a burden on me because I had to step up and play this role as an adult, when I was a child myself. Right. So, there came the physical abuse, the verbal abuse, because if the lines weren't straight in the carpet, I had to suffer some consequences. So, I just got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was tired of hurting, so I thought the easiest thing to do was take some pills, go to sleep, and just not feel. Right.
So that happened. So you took the pills, and then did somebody find you? How did you end up being okay?
It's funny. Actually, I had walked the kids to the store, and I got back to the residence, and they said as soon as I stepped over the threshold, I literally collapsed. And a cousin came in and was pouring milk down my throat, trying to stick his finger down my throat. And they called my aunts, my 2 great aunts, to come from church and to see me off to the hospital. So the paramedics were called, and I was took off and woke up 3 days later, screaming and crying for my mom, of course. And I was talking to a young lady there who had attempted suicide, and her family came to visit, and they were so loving and caring, and they just took me in as if, I was family. And my aunt walked in, and she goes, "Well, what are you crying for? You did this to yourself." And I'm kind of like, "Oh," and from there on, I just kind of shut it off. All feelings, all thoughts, everything. And took responsibility, okay, I did this to myself. So here I am again, suffering consequences.
So you kind of took it in as it's my fault.
It's my fault.
And did you feel that way? Do you think sometimes about even the abuse that happened? Did it sometimes feel like it was your fault?
Today I know it wasn't my fault.
Sure.
I can't be responsible for somebody else's actions. And there were adults, I was a child. So no, in a sense, but there came a time and point in my life where I had to step up and take responsibility for the part I played in it.
Sure.
Because I began to be manipulative. I would lie and tell my uncle, "Look, if you don't give me your money, I'm going to tell them this." And he would give me money. And by that time, the sexual abuse had stopped. But that was something I can hold over his head. And to me, it wasn't about the money. It was about, I'm going to take from you because you took from me. So, I mean, yes, I was wrong, for, being manipulative. But like I say, today I accept that, I'm fully responsible for being spiteful and revengeful, but the plus in it is that it stopped, so I never had to worry about him revisiting old situations.
Sure,
right?
Sure. But I'm sure, and I know for me growing up, when I was younger, I can relate to what you're saying about feeling like bad things are happening, but somehow it's my fault that they're happening. And then later realizing, oh, they were adults. I was the kid. I was the child. And I'm not responsible for what they did. But as a child, it's kind of hard to figure that out, I think, sometimes.
Yes, it is. And once, my thing was, once the abuse started, I just began to feel weak. My voice began to disappear because of the fact that I shared it and the person I shared it with, I don't think they was able to handle that at the time. So I had to learn to just stuff.
That's a
To
huge.
stuff, which was not a good thing because then I began isolating, which opens you up to be victimized. Hmm.
I think what you shared right now is so profound, and I know it happens a lot where bad things are happening, there's sexual abuse happening, and then as a child you get the courage to share with somebody, and that person doesn't believe you for whatever reason. Like you
Right.
said, they couldn't hold it. But I know for those of us who have experienced sexual abuse, it's so important that we're believed
Yes,
when we
absolutely.
share. And so I know when that happens, like you said, as a child, all those coping walls come up. I
Yes.
become shut down. I don't want to share. I'm not going to share with anybody. You know, there's nothing else to do with all that trauma that's happening except to shove it down deep inside.
Right.
And like you said, put up the walls and become very, very tough.
Yes.
Like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to share anymore. And I'm not going to connect with anybody anymore. Right?
Absolutely.
So your heart becomes hard.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I know for you, and I really appreciate you sharing because I think, again, your story is so deeply powerful. You talked about how as you got older, you would run a lot and you would run
Yes.
away a lot, and then you ended up on the streets for a while.
Yes. I actually became a runner about the age of 9 that I noticed. And it began to go on and on all the way up until my late 30s. Yes. If it was too much chaos, too much drama, I would just walk, and just try to get away from any environment that I wasn't comfortable in. And like I said before, stated before, it opens you up because a predator knows his prey,
Mm.
his or her prey. And so I was targeted a lot. It got to the point by the time I was about in fifth or sixth grade, I literally had to have a family member meet me so that I can walk home from school safely because there were so many. I had a few men that had literally stopped me. I had developed at a very early age. So they were driving cars and let the top down and, perform acts on themselves, riding along the side of me. It had got really scary.
Wow. Wow. And then as you got older, what age were you when you really started heading into your addiction and kind of going out onto the streets?
Uh, about the age of, I want to say 13, I experimented with alcohol and marijuana, but that was shortly lived. It was just about having somewhere to be, somebody to hang out with in the midst of running away. And I decided I can't do that. But as years passed, I want to say about the age of 23, um, I was taking care of a great aunt, same one I moved in with as a child. I just wanted to give back what was given to me. She could have left me in the foster system. So due to the fact she had enough love to take me in, I went and cared for her. It became overwhelming being back in the environment and living back in that household, dealing with the same people I had in the past and working 24, 36-hour shifts, trying to care for her. Yeah, it just became overwhelming. I began to experiment with, first it was meth to try to stay up, and that was shortly lived, and I moved on to crack. It started off Primos, and I noticed they were making me too lean back, so I tried to go in a little deeper, and I tried crack cocaine. Yes, which was the worst mistake of my life. Yes, and to stay up and take care of what I had to take care of. And in the beginning, I was functional. But however, my family decided that I no longer needed to be in the household due to the fact I was using. And I kind of felt like I was through to the wolves because I have other family members that come and go, and they're actually on that same drug, and they're doing absolutely nothing. And I'm here trying to take care of this woman, and you guys just throw me out to the wolves. So by then, I had to get a motel, and that didn't work out so well due to the fact that other addicts knew there I was in a motel. They figured it was open for get high, and everything that came along with it. Then I ended up moving in with my father, and I did not know that he was an active user, and that became hard to accept and deal with, and to the point where I just decided it was best that I go. And eventually, excuse me, after trying family member and so-called friend after friend and family member, it got to a point where I just felt more comfortable sleeping on the sidewalk in the street where I can see everything coming and going.
Wow. And what was that like, Chris? I mean, I know you now, and you're amazing, and you are so loving, and you help people, and it hurts my heart, to think of you in that place, because that place is a really hard place to be.
Yes.
What was it like for you when you were on the street?
Well, actually, it was my safe haven, believe it or not. Because, like I said, I had tried family member, friend, those known and unknown. And to not be able to get a night's sleep without waking up with somebody standing over you, or these things taking place while you're trying to sleep and you're startled out of your sleep, you're waking up and like, no, not again. Uh, so actually, I took to the streets as if it was the norm. I would even, if I felt uncomfortable, I would literally go in the laundromat and get in the dryer and literally throw a blanket over me. So nobody knew I was out there. Nobody knew where I was. It's like, okay, this is your peace of mind. You don't have to drug right now. You don't have to hang out in the streets, and you don't have to sleep on the sidewalk.
Wow. Wow. Chris, one of the things that we were talking about earlier that really struck me, there was a couple of things when you were talking about your time on the street, and that is you were talking about the people that would kind of see something different in you and talk to you, and how there were times when you would go to church, even if you had your drug paraphernalia and everything with you, you would still go.
Yes.
And I think sometimes in our lives we can see people maybe on the street or see people in that place, and we can feel like there's no hope for them, or just pass them by without really realizing that they have a story. And here you were growing up at a very young age, having a lot of chaos and a lot of drama around you, a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of molestation and rape, and not finding safety or haven in other homes where the streets became more safe for you than anywhere else. And obviously using drugs because you're medicating, because that makes it feel better. And so we see all of that damage from what happened earlier. But then just talk for just a minute about, the times where maybe somebody would stop and talk to you, or the times where you went to church.
Yes, it's funny because, believe it or not, literally my cigarettes, coffee came before the drug. So I would always stand outside of this little donut shop, and I would have people in passing say, "Hey, you, come here." And I'll go, "Me?" They go, "Yeah, it's just something about you. You got that little glow." And I would say, "That little glow, huh?" And literally they will sit down with me. They would say, "Hey, you're hungry? Would you like another cup of coffee?" And they would talk to me as if I'm the norm, just general conversation, and then we'll go into uh, the life I'm living. How did I end up where I am at that particular time? And it was just a blessing because those people that came in and took that little time out with me gave me hope. They literally gave me hope when I thought there was none. And it was funny because when they would leave, I would literally cry because I would be like, wow, okay, they're gone. Now back to the drugging, You know, the sleeping on the streets, the dealing with everybody else, the chaos, the drama. It was just back to that life, you know, and that hopelessness, you know. But I'm so grateful that those people took that time out with me because even though it was short lived, physically, mentally, it stayed. And emotionally, you know, I would think of those people for the strength to move forward. Yes. And I was one of those people who literally with the pipe in my mouth, I'll be on my knees crying and praying, like, Lord, you know, cursing him for at a time, like, why am I still here in this situation? I'm calling out to you. And I would run into the church with everything in hand. And thank God for my church. They're so loving. You know, they will discard what needed to be discarded. And they will lay me down. They would just pray over me, and give me a choice at the end of the service. And, you know, as in, what do you want to do? And it took about 5 years of me going in and out, you know, getting clean a couple of months or whatever to relapsing. And one day the pastor just touched me on my shoulder. He said, Christa, he said, you're going to be all right. And I didn't even know he knew my name. And from that day on, I just never looked back. Wow. Never.
That's amazing, Chris. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, because there's so much inspiration in that. And I look at you now. Let's talk about now. Let's talk about what has recovery been like for you? What has healing been like for you? What has it been like overcoming? Obviously, you're in recovery.
Yes,
you don't
I am.
use anymore. You're doing things for mental health, and you know, I think we talked a little bit earlier too about responsibility, about
Yes.
how you recognize it's 100% not your fault for what people did,
Right.
but that you wanted to break a cycle.
Yes, absolutely. Coming from where I come from, like I stated before, long line of alcoholics, addicts, you know, and incest. You know, I had to draw the line somewhere. I didn't want to see the next person in line suffer. And prior to my mom dying, you know, she led me in every direction that I was supposed to go in. The rooms of recovery, she introduced me to her friends in the fellowship, back to the church house, you know. She pulled me and my great aunt a little bit tighter. And I was able to move forward from there. You know, and when she left here, prior to her leaving, she celebrated my first year sobriety birthday. I knew after that I could never look back. And so today I continue to be sober, clean and sober, from all mood, mind, altering substances, through God's grace and mercy. Yes, so I do participate in recovery, and I do participate in treating my mental health. At Exodus, yes, I do, and those are the two best things that I could have ever done. You know, because first of all, I got to treat my mental health. I have to balance that out in order to stay clean and sober from the drugs, right? Alcohol and anything else, yes.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I think about when I think about you is Chris did one of the grief recovery classes that I
Yes,
taught.
I did.
And she drove a ways. Was it about 40 minutes to an hour?
Yes.
An hour drive each way. She would drive. She doesn't love to drive on the freeways, I will tell you, but she would take that trip, and
Absolutely.
she would make every class, and she worked through a lot of hard things as well. And I think that was really, really courageous of you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And what do you feel like the benefit has been from deciding, okay, I'm going to break this cycle. I'm not going to be in this, I'm not going to continue this family cycle. It's probably been in your family for generations. I'm going to face the truth as hard as it is. I'm going to face the pain.
Absolutely.
What do you feel like the benefit is of doing that?
Okay, my thing is, if no one ever extended their hand to me, where would I be? So I'm in hopes that anything said can touch at least one person. You know, even if it's just to open their eyes to what they have going on with them. Mm-hmm. You know, or to help somebody else that's in need. say, hey, you can change this. You don't have to settle for this. You don't have to go through this. There is hope. You can put a stop to this. Nobody deserved to be abused. Not mentally, not physically, not emotionally. And I had to stand up for myself. I was tired of hurting. I was tired of suffering. And because as a result to the things that I have been through, I found out at the age of 13 I couldn't have kids. And for many a years, I felt like I was less than a woman. But then a light came on. A light came on. Maybe it's not meant for you to have kids and care for them. Maybe there's someone else out there you can extend your hand to.
And you do. You definitely do. I think what stands out to me more than anything about Chris is joy. You have
Absolutely.
so much joy. You do. I mean, Chris walks into a room and lights up the room. That's kind of her. And I'm married to your brother, and I feel like you were one that just welcomed me into the family.
Absolutely.
I remember the first time I met you, there was such a connection. Yes. You connect with people, and I feel like the one thing that Satan tried to steal from you, which was your joy and your hope, is something that you live every day. I mean, you are joyful.
Thank you. Yes. I think once you begin to shed all those layers of skin, right, that you get to know you. And for me, I'm just so grateful, that I was delivered. Delivered, right, from the hurt, from the pain, from the addiction, all those things I can let to light, because for me, acceptance was the key. I accept what took place, the part I played in it, I dealt with it, now it's time to move on. And that works for me.
Yeah, and that's really big that you say that. A lot of dealing with sexual abuse, dealing with those things there is an acceptance that this happened. I'm not going to deny it anymore. I'm not going to minimize it anymore. I'm going to state this happened. This was not my fault.
Right.
And there are things that I'm taking responsibility for, and the responsibility part is I'm going to take responsibility for my healing and for my betterment, but there's joy on the other side. So,
absolutely.
Thank you, Chris. This was amazing. I'm really grateful that you were willing to share. I know it's hard, it's funny, you do a show like this for anybody out there, and it seems like we're just in the living room, but there's like cameras and lights, and you sit down and you're like, whoa, this feels a little daunting. And yet Chris is so open, and I know that there's somebody that's going to either watch this or who is watching this now that's going to be impacted by your story, because I see the way that you live, and you love your little dog, and you love life,
right?
And Chris is it's contagious to be around you in a good way,
right?
In a good way. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being in my life, and I'm so grateful. You're such a blessing, such a blessing.
She's awesome.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And, I want to say if you're watching, whether you're watching this live or you watch this in the future, if there's any part of Chris's story that pricks your heart, if there's any part of hearing her that you feel like, wow, there's something inside of me that I need to deal with, I want to encourage you to do that. Don't let things fester. Don't let them sit. We talk about these deep things because it's really the only way to come out of the pain and into living. And absolutely. That's what this time is all about. That's what this show is all about. It's about living.
Yes.
And we understand that in order to do that, you can't just stay stuck in denial. You can't stay stuck in minimizing. You can't stay stuck in avoiding. It does take coming forward. It does take saying, this really hurts. This is really hard. But at the same time, to understand that there is another side. So I want to thank everybody that tuned in today, and everybody that's going to watch in the future. If there's anything that you want to go deeper with, you can always private message me. That's always an option. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. If there's any questions you have for Chris, you can even post those in the comments. Absolutely. That would be totally fine. And we are definitely here to help. So thank you everybody for tuning in. This has been amazing.